welcome to another episode of the Mystic Sisters. I'm Julie.
I'm Amy.
And today it is early October, so we have our fun little half costumes on.
We're dressed up.
Yeah. And it's feeling very autumnal around here. Is that a word? And we're just thinking a lot about spirituality and Halloween and some of the things we see around this time of year. And we were thinking a lot about how young women today express their spirituality and how we see a lot of young women openly calling themselves witches. So we wanted to talk a bit about the popularity of witchcraft. What does witchcraft offer to women? What does it not offer to women? Why is this phenomenon happening? We were recently at a fall festival here in rural Appalachia, and we met a number of young women who called themselves witches. And
older women, I'd like to say.
Yes, good point. Older women too. So it's a real phenomenon in the modern world with women in particular, and there's no stigma around it, it seems. And so, why is this happening? What is going on? So Amy, you want to kick it off?
Yes. So Julie, what do you think draws young women to witchcraft today? And how does pop culture push women toward witchcraft?
Well, I think part of it is that witches, they're often portrayed in media, and they have an aesthetic that I think women really like. There's kind of almost like a Victorian or Gothic aesthetic. But aside from that, just like the character of a witch that is especially depicted in media, maybe like practical magic or these sorts of hocus pocus. But I think that a lot of women identify with witches in the first place from an archetypal space, because witches are allowed to be complex, dynamic, intelligent women. And maybe the other archetypes they see in the culture, like the archetype of the mother, seems too flat. And they think, well, how can I be complex and dynamic like I truly am and identify with these other archetypes? So I think that's part of what's going on. Smart women are often drawn to witchcraft. And there's also an element where young women,
creative women, are drawn to it too.
Right. Yeah. I've seen that a lot.
Artistic women with a visual sense seem to be drawn to witchcraft also.
Yep. Women with a connection to nature, which we'll talk, I think, more about later. But if you feel connected to nature, if you're a very intuitive woman who's in touch with your intuition, your feelings, it seems like it offers something in that space. And then there's also the crossover with feminism, where a lot of women who are drawn to witchcraft reject patriarchy. So it's, when we think of the witch, we think of this like individual woman who's not really defined by her relationships to men or to children. Often it's defined by her relationships to other women, because they'll have like a coven. So it's just about women and women. So if you're a young woman or an older woman who rejects patriarchy and sees that as something bad, you're probably going to reject organized religion, because many of them are patriarchal. And then you'll find your way to witchcraft. So, and then there's also the fact that as far as pop culture, there's not a lot of Christian culture or movies or music that seems cool or aesthetic. Like, a lot of it's real cringe, and people pick up on that. But then you have artists like Doja Cat using dark and satanic imagery and making it seem cool and empowering and independent to dabble with the occult. So I think that's a lot of what's going on there. So what is it then about Western Christianity? We live in like a culture with a backbone of Christianity, but obviously women in America are largely rejecting Western Christianity. And we can talk about what we mean by Western Christianity. So Amy, what is it about Western Christianity that pushes women away from Christ and towards witchcraft?
Well, I think, like we said, that women are seeking an aesthetic. Like we said, this draws a lot of intelligent, creative women to it. Women who, like making things and like expressing a visual image. So I think that the reason are seeing this rise in the West, you have to understand history a little bit to understand why it's such a phenomenon. So America is a very Protestant country. And what does Protestant mean? Well, Protestant means to protest. Well, what are they protesting? They're protesting the Catholic Church. Well, what's the Catholic Church? The Catholic Church was an Orthodox church that defected from the other Orthodox churches. What's an Orthodox church? An Orthodox church is the original church of Christ. So I went backwards there trying to explain this. I think this is one of the most important things you need to understand about where we're at in history. Like, this is a historic timeline that explains a lot of what you see in America. So there were the 5 centers of the original Church of Christ. They used to be synagogues, and then Christ came, and New Testament, Jesus is the Son of God. They became Christian churches. But one of the 5 was Rome. And Rome decided to, I'll just like keep it short and brief because I'm not a historian, but basically decided like, we're going to have the Pope and he'll be supreme. The other Orthodox churches were like, you can't really do that. And Rome was like, watch us. So they became the Roman Catholic Church. It made a lot of changes. And then it got very corrupt. So the Roman Church had indulgences, which is the idea that you have to pay money to the church to be forgiven of your sin. And a lot of the priests were like sleeping with prostitutes, and there was just a lot of corruption going on. And so the Protestant Reformation was protesting the corruption of the Catholic Church. But the problem is that they got further away from the original core of Orthodoxy and decided to just strip ritual away. I don't know a ton about it, but I know that like America is a very Protestant country, and stripping away the ritual meant you were stripping away the aesthetic and the beauty. So that means a lot of Protestant churches don't have any art in them. They're very bare bones. You won't see depictions of holy figures or people because they consider them graven images. And yeah, witchcraft, to go back to witchcraft, I think that women yearn for a sense of beauty, and women are very intuitive and, like aesthetics. So witchcraft has candles and incense and cute little spell bottles, and women can feel very connected to the aesthetics of nature through witchcraft. Witchcraft gives you like herbs and flowers, and it connects you to the natural world aesthetically. But what they don't know, because of where they're at in history and geographically, is that Orthodox churches offer you a sense of aesthetics better than witchcraft does. During feast days and holidays, we use pussy willows, palms, flowers. There's a lot of the imagery around the icons are leaf-like and look like natural patterns. Flowers are always present. We decorate the cross with flowers on Sunday of the Cross. And so, a lot of these women, I think, grew up because most people in America, I think, are Protestant or Catholic. So these women were probably raised by Protestants and Catholics, and they're rejecting it. And I can't really blame them for it, because if you think that Christianity is this stripped down kind of bare bones, almost clinical looking thing, then you're not probably going to connect with it if you have like an intuitive and a visual sense. So I think that's why they're pushed away. Also, I think you mentioned they don't like patriarchy, and they see the Christian church as patriarchal. And I don't think that it's been explained to them like what patriarchy in its ideal form actually is, which is benevolent men protecting women and understanding their vulnerabilities. It's not about oppressing you. That's kind of a whole other topic that I don't know if we want to get too much into it. But
yeah, I think you're right. I think that women who are intuitive and in touch with beauty and in touch with their inner world sometimes look at the Christianity that they were raised with, whether Protestant or Catholic. Our Catholic church we were raised in looks like a Protestant church, doesn't have beauty. It's a very modern building that was built, I think, in the 70s. There's a couple statues, but comparing that to the Orthodox church that we attend now and all of the Orthodox churches that we've been in, which have absolutely stunning icons in gold. And again, like, turning towards Christ isn't just about beauty. I got some flack on Twitter when I pointed this out, that women turn away from Protestantism because they're seeking beauty, and then they end up in the arms of like the New Age and witchcraft. it's not only about that. Obviously, that's not what we're saying, but a lot of women and to a lot of people, beauty is important to their soul. It's nurturing, it's nourishment, it's God is the author of all beauty. So it's natural to want to seek that. But unfortunately, people end up seeking it in these spiritual practices that have really harmful beliefs. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about like the failures of Western Christianity kind of pushing people into the arms of witchcraft.
Yeah. And yeah, there's some dimensions to it. We're just focusing on aesthetics because I think maybe with social media, we see a lot of accounts that are like Tiffany, the good witch, and like which sister, like the Instagram names and handles. Like if you look at this account, you can see the kind of aesthetic they're going for. And that's a big part of why they like it.
It's often an appealing aesthetic. Like,
yeah,
it's really cute. It really is. It's like dried flowers and like little colored bottles and candles and things like that. And they've grown up in a world where they didn't see beauty associated with Christianity. I didn't know that beauty was associated with Christianity until I was much older and like did a deep dive back into Christianity.
Or you saw some older churches.
Yeah, saw older churches, discovered iconography, and kind of even like revisited like Catholic Renaissance art, which I do think is beautiful. And really started looking around and going, oh, there is so much beauty in Christianity. But I think on the surface level, people can really forget that, especially post, what was it, like Novus Ordo, when they started like changing the liturgy, and a lot of our town, they tore down a beautiful old Catholic church. I found an old drawing of it, and they tore that down and put up something that's just like very modern and looks like the eye. It's hard to describe, but it literally looks like the Eye of Sauron, like the tower. Anyway, bad architecture. So there's all these things.
It's almost hostile looking.
Yeah.
I can see.
Yeah.
So what are the downsides of practicing witchcraft?
Yeah, right. Because, okay, so young women are like, they maybe move towards witchcraft because it's pretty and this and that. And maybe it helps them to feel like they can retain their identity as dynamic and interesting and complex women and still have a spirituality and commune with the spiritual world. But there are downsides to practicing witchcraft, especially on a long enough timeline. Typically, something we've noticed is that women who practice witchcraft still talk a lot about having anxiety and mental health problems. So a big, reality, I think, of the Christian church is that it's healing. I think that Orthodox Christianity has what you need to heal your soul. And it's not to say Christians are perfect or they're never going to experience a mental health issue or anxiety, but there's so much healing that goes on when you are, following God and praying, engaging in prayer, and taking communion, like engaging in the practices of the Christian church and taking part in the sacraments. Whereas I've never seen anyone who practices witchcraft really experience healing. It seems like actually they just continue to struggle with anxiety, depression, mental health problems. And this is just purely observational. Like, yeah, I wish it worked, but it doesn't seem to. Like, just observational reality.
It's because you're your own God, and you're not big enough to take away your own pain. Right. You need something bigger to put your anxieties on.
Yeah, like,
and if you manifest everything and you're the one casting the spells, well, then you're the little goddess.
Yeah,
they always call themselves goddesses.
Yep.
And you're not big enough to do the work.
Yeah. And it's putting too much on the self, right? Like, okay, God is the immutable one. He's constant, unchanging, and he possesses supreme intelligence. He's supremely good. He's omnibenevolent, omnipotent, and omnipresent. So he's everywhere. He knows all things, and he's all good, right? You, as a tiny little human being, as much as you want to call yourself a goddess or a witch or whatever, you know that you're not that. Like, deep down, you're not all good. You're not obviously like omnipresent. You don't know everything that's going on everywhere. And you're not omnipotent either. Like, you don't have supreme control. So to set yourself up as a little goddess or a little god and think that you have manifesting powers and that you control your fate in that way, it creates anxiety because deep down, that you don't have that. So I think that's part of the reason why it creates such anxiety, because these women don't have anything to rest upon. Like, now that I'm a Christian, if I have anxiety or I'm worried about something, I'll give it to God. But who do they give it to?
Like, the universe. But then they say you are the universe experiencing itself. So it's like, so it's going to you.
Yep.
But you already have it. So where's it go? It doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. And there is something real to co-creating with God. I do believe that we co-create with God. And yet you'll hear these women saying that they are co-creating with the universe, or they're appealing to the universe for their so-called, well, for their prayers. They wouldn't probably use the word prayer, but like, what is the issue with appealing to the universe instead of to God?
Yeah. Who created the universe? We did a little booth this weekend, and the woman next to us was a pagan witch, and she was very confused by us because we had kind of like a Baroque, I don't know, this kind of like magical whimsy aesthetic. And then she saw that we were selling stickers with Jesus and Mary on them, and I was selling art prints with Jesus and Mary, and she said that outright. She said, I thought you guys were pagan, but then I saw Jesus here. And I actually really enjoyed the conversation. I really like talking to witches and pagans because I understand where they're coming from, and I totally understand why they arrived at their conclusion.
And they have a sense of spirituality. They're not atheists.
Yeah, she's not an atheist. Yeah. And she said, well, it doesn't matter what you call it, the universe, the source. She had some other word too.
Yeah.
Energy. The good energy or something. And I think I said, well, I just believe that God created the universe, because I think that, like, I just don't stop there. I go one step further. And she was really open-minded, and she even was like, I'm really glad I'm next to you because I'm learning a lot.
Yeah.
So it's like these women are totally reachable. It's like, I see it as this like marketing problem on the part of the church, honestly, which I've gotten criticism for saying, but I really do think that, like, it's a communication problem.
But I think another thing that I see as an issue with these beliefs is that there's a lack of distinction between creator and created, which is kind of what you were getting at. Like, because they appeal to the universe all the time. So they're appealing to creation instead of to the creator. And when you lack that hierarchy and that understanding, you're just going to struggle. Like, it just creates like a weird
it creates a flatness.
So
if there's no like hierarchy, and every religion's the same, I'll get into that in a minute, or you are the universe that created everything, there's just not enough, it's too flat and non-hierarchical. I think that's where the anxiety comes from.
There's nothing higher to appeal to. There's nothing higher than yourself, because we're part of the universe, right? And they say that.
Yeah.
And then they're appealing, like you said, appealing to the self.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yep. So what are the specific aspects of witchy beliefs that are harmful to women? We've covered a little bit of it, but what else?
I mean, the one thing this woman told me is that, like, and I've heard this a lot in New Age and witchy circles, is that all religions are ultimately the same. They all have the same mystic core, and it doesn't matter which religion you are, because they're all the same at core. Which I think is just, you're really, this is very taboo. You're not allowed to say this in America. Like, what I'm saying right now is very politically incorrect, but I don't think that all religions are the same. I think they result in very different societies. Their outcomes are very different,
and different outcomes for the individual.
Yeah, and for the individual.
And communities.
There are parts of Islam where I would not be sitting here talking to you with little ears on and my face uncovered. Like, these religious beliefs do have different implications for people in society. So they're very, like, morally relative. Like, I would say, well, I think this, and she'd be like, and that's good for you. But for me, like, what I think is valid too. We don't agree. Like, I actually don't think that what she was saying was valid. I think one of the specific beliefs that I have a problem with in witchcraft is, this woman I was talking to, was a witch, agreed that there are good and bad spirits, but she doesn't have any way to discern between them. And I said that to her. So she's non-judgmental, but she's not discerning. So, like, they'll agree there are evil forces, but they have no way of identifying if a force they are dealing with is evil or not. So I just figure, why not align yourself with the most benevolent deity, which is Jesus Christ, who conquered death, if in your faith practice there's no way of really telling what is evil or not. Like, it's just your own authority that tells you whether or not something is good or evil. But I told her that demons masquerade as angels of light. Like they're smarter than humans. They're on a different realm than humans. So they have more information than you, and they can deceive you, and they know you better, maybe even than you know yourself. So yeah. That's one of the problems with it, is it doesn't give you like a map through the spiritual world.
And you're not protected.
You're on your own. You're not protected. You don't have like anyone really looking out for you. So if you do some like spell or summoning ceremony, I had someone tell me this, that they tried to summon an ancestor and they think they summoned a demon. And it's like, yeah, you don't know what you're meddling with, because your practices don't have any like roadmaps.
And you're not protected. Like if Christ conquered the spiritual world, right?
Yeah,
he's
the king.
Don't you want to be with the king? Like instead of like these deities that are, they're not all benevolent, right? There are angels and demons, and it's true. Witches agree with this. It just seems like they don't care too much to discern, like you said.
Yeah,
they don't know what they're communing with when they do tarot, which we'll talk a little bit about.
Yeah.
And then there's also like one other thing we talked about with this woman, and is Reiki, which I'm not sure how much witches practice Reiki, but it's definitely within this whole purview of like New Age beliefs and witch beliefs.
I wanted to say real quick, we're not like really talking about Wicca. I don't know a lot about Wicca. I'm talking about like pagan New Age witches. This is the trend that I see.
So. Yeah, they're kind of like, it's kind of cafeteria religion-ish, where they're like taking pieces of Hinduism and pieces of the New Age and pieces of witchcraft and putting it all together. But this woman was talking about Reiki and how she believes Reiki is healing. And for those of you who don't know what Reiki is, I'm going to give like my best explanation of it. I'm not sure if this is how they would describe it, but I did have it done once back when I was more New Age. And you kind of lay down, and this like energy worker will like put crystals on your body and try to like align your chakras and like heal your energy centers, remove blockages. She told me I had a blockage in my throat chakra, and she put like crystals on my body.
You do not have a blockage in your throat chakra. She talks a lot.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So, and I said, I tried Reiki. I was very anxious when I tried Reiki. I was having really bad anxiety. So I went to a Reiki healer, and it didn't work at all. I was not healed of my anxiety. But whenever I started to engage in prayer and actually take my concerns and worries to God and pray and have a dialogue with God, have a relationship with God, and actually talk to him, that's when my anxiety became more manageable. And
I don't want to say that like being a Christian means you will never have anxiety or struggles. That is totally not
true. I'm just saying that like the healing practices of witchcraft or New Age or whatever, for me, they're just not as effective. Yeah. Not for me. I think for everybody, they're not as effective.
Yeah.
I'm not a relativist. Like I actually think for everyone, they're not as effective. So
yeah. And just like not true. Did I talk about manifestation? So I wanted to say that another problem with this idea of witchcraft is that you like cast spells and manifest things to like get what you want, but it doesn't account for all the things that happen to us in life that are not what we want. So if we are, expert manifestors and we're like manifesting everything that we want in the universe, will give it to us. Well, if you get cancer, then isn't that your fault because you manifested poorly? That it falls apart like pretty quickly. You just have to think about it for like, a couple seconds to see that it's not
right. And then
I do think your thoughts have power. That's an Orthodox concept. Like there's a book called Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives that a monk wrote. But I just wouldn't go so far as to say that like it's that idea that you are the one in full control.
Yeah, it's like both and. Like I am obviously if I eat junk food every day, I might get sick. So I am in control of certain aspects of my life, but there's plenty that I don't control. And you hear about people where like their child gets sick or like something, they get in a car accident. So it's not all, it's both and. It's like there's much that I control and much that I don't. And obviously like the serenity prayer deals with this, right? Like it's asking for discernment, of asking God to help you discern what you can control and what you can't, and to have grace and peace for the things you can't control. And honestly, I believe, and this is a Christian belief, is that when something bad happens or something even that's hard to understand, something you wouldn't have wanted for yourself happens, that can grow you in virtue. Like it can grow your patience, it can grow your grace, it can grow your endurance. Like all these virtues grow when we go through hardship. So honestly, like, do you even want a life where it's only good things happening to you? Like, because then how do you even develop character? Like, you really gain endurance when something bad happens to you. And obviously, we don't want bad things to happen to ourselves. We would rather not. But they do happen. It is a thing, and you grow and you become better. It's like a spindly tree, right? And if it's never subject to the wind, it doesn't gain strength, right? So you need that wind. You need those forces on it.
I don't think that witches disagree that hardship is that life should be perfect here.
I'm just saying that, like, if it's all about manifestation, then you're just trying to manifest the good, right?
Yeah, no one wants to manifest.
And there's just so much out of our control, and that's okay.
Yeah,
basically, is what I'm saying.
Let's talk about tarot. So a lot of witches practice tarot. Can you speak to that and like explain why it's so popular?
Yeah, so I used to dabble in tarot. It's an occult practice. It's basically like an attempt to gain the knowledge of the spiritual world by means of like contact with supposed deities, right? And that could mean contact with demons. Like, we don't, like, it's kind of a like nebulous thing, right? Like, you don't know what deities you're communing with. But I want to talk more about like as far as tarot, like, why was I drawn to tarot? Well, in part because the illustrations are beautiful. I used the Rider-Waite tarot deck when I did tarot. That's probably the most popular and common tarot deck that is used. And I think that something that's interesting about that tarot deck, and tarot decks in general, are built on the symbolic and on archetypes. Like, there are the illustrations are beautiful, and they depict archetypes. And the illustrator of the Rider-Waite tarot deck was a woman named Pamela Coleman Smith. And I think something that's really interesting about her is that when she was 33 years old, she converted to Roman Catholicism. So she actually became a Christian. So I cannot find much about this online. Like, if you look at her Wikipedia page, the first line calls her an illustrator, writer, artist, publisher, and occultist. But she was not an occultist for most of her life. She died at age 73 and converted to Christianity when she was 33. So it's really weird to me that Wikipedia calls her an occultist just because she's known for illustrating the tarot deck, one of the most popular tarot decks, but she actually became a Christian. Now, I don't know what she would have said about tarot after becoming a Christian, but I imagine it would have been something she wouldn't have like endorsed anymore. But this part of her story is always forgotten. Mm-hmm. And she has a lot of other really beautiful illustrations that like aren't occult. But no one ever talks about that. So I find it really interesting that like witches that use tarot decks don't know that the woman who drew the tarot deck that they seemingly love became a Christian.
What about like Doreen Virtue?
Yeah.
So this is another woman who, when I lived in California and I was around witches and New Agers, you would see Doreen Virtue's angel cards everywhere. And it was she said she made them because she didn't like the depiction. The tarot deck has a devil card, and she didn't like that. It was too dark because her spirituality was pure love and light.
Oh, right.
So she made her own deck that was called angel cards or oracle cards, I think. And it was just angels, but she converted to Christianity too. And tried to pull all of her cards out of circulation, and she can't, obviously, but she won't sell them anymore. And she converted to Christianity too, and you never hear them. There's just a blind spot of the people who actually exited this. And
right, it's interesting, and it's really fascinating because I mean, there's something like, I understand being drawn to the symbolic and to archetypes, but
it's totally valid.
We can't know. I mean, we can self-reflect without like using an occult practice, right? Because I often felt like when I did tarot, like I'd pull the cards and I'd be like, oh, I got the what's the one with the three women, like
Three of Cups.
Yeah, is that the Three of Cups? Yeah, I got the Three of Cups. Oh, well, my friendships have been good lately, or this and that. And like, you would like
you kind of project onto
cards to project onto them. But
it's all bullshit. It's all made up. Like, I remember one time I would do tarot and I told my friend, like, I keep pulling the same cards, and she's like, oh yeah, that means it's time to give it a break. I'm like, what? Like, who says that?
Yeah.
Like, where's all this coming from?
It after a while, it just seemed a bit nonsensical to me, but also it felt like I do believe that you can commune with deities. And I was going into that, like, not knowing who or what I was communing with. So it's like not safe.
Like who, if you don't believe in God and you believe in like the universe, but you also believe that there are lots of spirits that are good and bad. Well, who are you talking to when you're calling to that, to who are you talking to when you're
Yep.
doing these practices?
How do you know?
And no one can really answer that, at least with like, Orthodox Christianity. We know we're talking to either saints who followed Jesus or Jesus's mother. So there's a clarity there.
Right. Yep. There's a clarity. Your prayers are directed, right? Instead of just having this like openness. And that's another thing I notice about witches and New Agers is they're all about like eroding boundaries, whether in this life or spiritually. And that can be harmful. Like it's like G.K. Chesterton said, like, if you're going to tear down a fence, you have to know why it was in place first. So I think there's some like nebulous thing to tarot where, like you said, it's like, who are you directing your energies to?
Yeah. And I'm not like blaming any of these women. I think that there's a huge miseducation problem about what like actual Christianity is. So I totally see why they go their own way. Also, America is a very like hyper individualistic nation. So it's very like, it leans more individualistic than community focused. So I can see why they wouldn't like an organized community religion, and they would want to like do their own thing.
Right.
Because they're steeped in this American culture.
And I do think a lot of women and Americans in general are lonely and could find a lovely community in church that would nourish them in ways that they're not being nourished, because so many of our civil institutions have broken down. Like Americans don't engage in their local communities the way that they used to. A lot of people are lonely, and then they reach out on their screens for companionship. So that kind of brings us to like, what does Orthodox Christianity have that young women who are drawn to witchcraft might actually appreciate?
Yeah, I think I got into this a little bit at the beginning, but I guess like authentic, true Christianity has beauty and symbolism in the icons. Icons are paintings of religious figures, saints, especially female saints. There are a lot of Orthodoxy has a huge presence of like important women in its theology, and I don't think that women know that. I think they just see like Christianity, Jesus was a man, this is like a male religion, and
they see the male priests.
Yeah, they see the male priests, and they think there's no place, and women just have to be like wives and moms, and there's no place for like someone like me who might be like complicated and maybe not married or have kids. And it's like, we actually have a lot of female saints who never married and had kids, who were beautiful witnesses to spirituality. But again, they just don't know that.
And I also want to say that our icons we don't believe they're just paintings. Like, we believe they're windows to heaven. Like, you are communing with people who are alive in Christ, who are with Christ, who are dead on this earth, but are alive, because we believe in eternal life. So like, that's so beautiful that when you look at an icon, it's like you are communing with the saint, and you know who, like you said, you know who you're communing with. You're not just open up to whatever comes through the tarot practice.
And left to your own discernment. It's like, this person had a life, people knew them. A lot of people had a testament to like their miracles or their incredible life and what they did. There's like other eyewitnesses to the saints and their stories. So yeah. And I also think that Orthodox Christianity is sensual. So, and what I mean by that is it engages all the senses. I think that a lot of women are drawn to the New Age and witchcraft because of its sensuality. Like, there's, smell, sight, taste, touch, but Western Orthodoxy has that as well. We have incense and candles. In church, we sing, we use our voices. There's, our senses are engaged there. And I think, I don't know. It is a sensual religion. Like, and visually, we were just talking about the icons, which are the paintings. Right. There's sense of beauty.
And I think when you go to like, my experience of many Protestant churches is they're
not sexual.
Well, they're not in the sense that like visually they're terrible. There might be music, but it sounds cheesy and weird. In my opinion, it's often like cringy. And it's just something about the music. Same with the Roman Catholic churches. I found the hymns in Orthodoxy to be genuinely beautiful. And I often found the music in Roman Catholicism and in Protestant denominations to be cringy.
Corny.
But also, there was another sense I was going to point out, that
taste, Orthodoxy, eating Holy Communion.
Yes, taste,
the body and blood of Christ.
Touch, sight.
We kiss the icons. There's like a touch.
Yeah, there was another thing I was going to point out, but I can't remember what it was.
Sound, the music
Yeah,
we all
singing.
sing together.
Yeah, the candles are beautiful.
Mhm. So it is a participatory and act. I think people think like they think that you just sit there and don't participate, but you participate a lot. Even though the priest is conducting most
Oh,
of it.
yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that my experience of Protestant churches was that it was all about the mind. It was all about the head. It's basically like a lecture, a biblical lecture, where the pastor's up there and he's talking to you about the Bible, and he even has the verses written up there and you can take notes.
All
And
about the
people were
word.
taking notes, the word, the word, the word. And it's like, I get why women reject that, because it's like there's so much to our spiritual lives that is deep and sensory, and it's about all of this experience that we're having on this earth and the world beyond, and
Yes.
and to just make it about the mind and the head and understanding logically the word of God. I get why young women are like, nah, that ain't it.
Because women have to be embodied by virtue of being a woman. Like they
Right.
have to be in touch with their bodies, like
Yep.
because they're birth givers. Not every woman is, but like most women have the potential to give birth. So we like have to be in touch with our bodies in a way that men just aren't. There's just a
Yep.
difference there. So I can totally understand why they reject something they see as purely head focused.
And what I also love about Orthodox Christianity is the liturgical calendar really like connects us to the cycle of the year. So like the liturgical calendar starts with the birth of Mary, right? And then it ends with the dormition of Mary, so her falling asleep and going to be with the Lord.
Her death.
Yeah, and so there is this whole like calendar, and something you'll see with witches a lot is that they look at the cycles of the moon and they look at the seasons. Like there's this really, women have this like desire to be connected to like the cycle of the year, and Orthodox Christianity has that. It has a calendar, right? And yes, like Roman Catholicism has that too, and Protestants obviously celebrate Easter and Christmas, but in Orthodox Christianity there's so much more of a focus on our like feast days, and I've found myself much more connected to the calendar becoming Orthodox than I was as a Catholic. And again,
we're highly biased.
I'm super biased. I have wonderful Roman Catholic friends, wonderful Protestant friends. They're wonderful people. I just really feel like Orthodox Christianity specifically has what these people who are drawn to witchcraft and New Age need. Specifically
because
Orthodox
it has,
Christianity.
yeah, specifically because in our experience being raised Novus Ordo Roman Catholic, it was a very legalistic and kind of punitive and Western religion. Like it's very like law focused, and if you sin, we prescribe you. It's not a prescription for healing. It's like a punishment. Do 5 Hail Marys. Like prayer is kind of seen as a punishment, whereas it's
presented that way.
It's presented that way. Yeah. Like, oh, you've sinned. Now your punishment is to do 10 Hail Marys. That'll be hard for you. And whereas in Orthodox Christianity there's this like synergy between the head and the heart, and there's a merging of the mystical and the logical, and it's that perfect kind of yin and yang between these like hemispheres of the self, if you will.
Yep. And it gives you it also gives you a goal and like a path forward. I think a lot of women who practice witchcraft are really like searching for a path. One of the reasons women do tarot is because they want insight and they want to know what to do next.
Yeah.
And Orthodox Christianity really has a lot of prescriptions, but also we talk a lot about theosis, which is like how we participate in the energies of God, and find our way to heaven. And I think that is something that would really resonate with women who are drawn to witchcraft, because they are looking for a path forward.
And they talk about energy work all the time. You were talking about Reiki, and that's an energy movement practice. They really like these kinds of things. Like, and Orthodoxy contains the energies of God. So
it's something we talk about, the essence and energies of God. And so when I heard that, like coming from more of a New Age type of background, or at least a period in my life when I was more New Age, like that really resonated with me. I was like, oh, like they talk about energy, and that resonated. So yeah, I think that it and even like witches will have an altar, right?
Yeah,
now, it's
perverse, that's a good point.
But they understand intuitively that there's a need to make a sacrifice, and they don't know that like Christ was the final sacrifice, or maybe they know but they don't understand, but they even like will create altars where they have like their candles and their herbs and their crystals, and like they have this desire to create a space where they engage in meditation or sacrifice or whatever it is. And it's like like I've been to Protestant churches where they do communion once a month, if at all. There's no altar, it's just a stage where they play their guitars, right? So like if these young witches knew that like we have an altar, there is a reverence, there is a ritual, it's beautiful, maybe they would find that compelling.
Yeah, I honestly love New Agers because
Yeah,
I love them because I'm like, yeah, I totally
Totally get
I
it.
totally see what you see in this. Like,
Yep.
I see it too, but there's like a chapter forward that you might enjoy. So I got a lot out of talking to the witch that we talked to last weekend, because I like her sense of aesthetics and her openness, and that she's really, curious about
And they're
spirituality.
truly spiritual.
Yeah, she has a genuineness and
Yep.
an earnestness that's like extremely appealing. And I just, I hope that it's hard to gently, like, I want to explain that, like, Christianity is not what you've been taught it is.
Yep.
Like,
and they're seeking truth. Like they are seeking truth. I find that a lot of their beliefs are confused. Like there's distinctions that aren't there, discernment that isn't there, that if they had the understanding of Orthodox Christianity, I think it would click things into place. At least it did for me.
Yeah. I think also that I think that a lot of pagan witches think that Christianity, they have this like Crusades idea of Christianity,
that it's violent.
They think it was violent, and that it violently oppressed pagans, so they must be wrong. And that's just like one sect and part of Christianity, and like
history.
And
no Christian today would be like, yeah, we should kill. Like it's obviously
it's obviously thou shalt not kill is a commandment. Yeah. So that's something I need to get better at explaining to them, that
there are narratives, mainstream narratives about Christians that have served to turn people away from the church.
Yeah, they're memes. Yeah, like this is a meme sphere, this like new age meme sphere. Like,
yep, like like Christianity is imperialistic.
It's imperialistic and colonizing
or whatever. And that's a shame. And but it
should be addressed, really, because a lot of people are guided by these like memes, and these like, they're almost like surface level. They're memes. There's like a depth of history that isn't being explained,
right?
And it needs to be. So,
and I like what you said, bring it back to the beginning about people not knowing where they are in time. Like, if they just understood the history of the Christian church and could understand that the original church that Christ established exists, and it's beautiful, and it's healing, and it's reverent, and it has ritual, and it has beauty, and it's sensory, I think that would satisfy a lot of the spiritual hunger that we see in young women. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah. So that's our take. Please subscribe. And if you have thoughts on why
you want to plug anything, we should plug things.
Oh, we should. Okay.
Things. So I'm a painter, and I sell art prints on my website. I'll put it in the description. And what else do we sell? Julie sells headpieces, which you should like put on for this.
Oh yeah. They're a bit much, but they're real.
No, they're not. They're awesome.
They're crowns.
They're crowns.
And also art prints as well, of analog collages. So hand cut and pasted collages. So I have an Etsy shop. We'll link things in the description. Yeah. And we also write for a Substack called The Mystic Sisters. And we do podcast appearances on our friends' podcasts, other channels we've done recently. So yeah, we'll share links. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for listening, and happy October.